Welcome to NTD News. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Here are today's top stories. Vice President Mike Pence takes the lead with the coronavirus task force. After appointing new officials, he's calling the unit the front line of defense for the world against the virus. After a coronavirus case of unknown origin emerged in California, the state wants to broaden the requirements needed to get tested, but a lack of test kits may cause a delay. South Carolina prepares for its Democratic presidential primary. The state's vote is expected to determine the future of some candidates' campaigns. And a Chinese scientist is sentenced to prison for stealing over $1 billion in trade secrets from his former U.S. employer. Vice President Mike Pence takes control of the coronavirus task force, appointing new officials to join the existing team. The White House turns its attention to minimizing the impact of the virus in a worst-case scenario.
Vice President Mike Pence leads his first meeting as chief coordinator of the U.S. task force confronting the coronavirus. He will report recommendations from the team to the president. Pence said task force members and the agencies they represent are the front line of defense. Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar continues as chairman. Pence named a seasoned medical professional as response coordinator. Debbie Birx is the administration's global AIDS coordinator and a medical doctor. She will report directly to Pence. She also joins the task force. Alongside Birx, Pence and Azar announced the addition of more officials. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Jerome Adams, and Director of the National Economic Council Larry Kudlow. The White House and Pence's team ordered that future public communications from federal agencies about the virus response be cleared by their offices. The director of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases gave his expertise on the coronavirus, saying it's unique and troublesome and unusual that this type of virus spreads so easily between people.
What we need to do now, obviously, is the containment as well as, if it comes to that, the mitigation of the effect of this. So we're dealing with a serious virus that we're taking very seriously because of its potential.
He said the death rate is far greater than it is with influenza. President Trump's administration is considering ways to rapidly increase its stockpile of protective face masks and clothing. U.S. officials say one potential option is a law called the Defense Production Act, which grants the president the power to expand industrial production of personal protective equipment.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said the Senate hopes to take up a funding measure within the next 2 weeks to fight the spread of the virus. The emergency request is for $2.5 billion, although the president said they may end up using more if needed. And now to California, where 33 people have tested positive for the coronavirus, including some who were evacuated from the Diamond Princess cruise ship. 5 of the 33 patients have now left the state. California Governor Gavin Newsom is calling for more virus testing kits after the state had its first instance of transmission from an unknown origin.
The first U.S. coronavirus patient whose exposure to the disease is unknown could have been identified sooner. The patient went to the hospital on February 19th but was refused a test because they didn't meet the criteria. To qualify, they had to have a link to Hubei, China. They were tested for the virus 4 days later. The case in California marks a turning point for testing. The CDC revised its criteria for who qualifies for a test. If community spread takes place, then no link to China is necessary to contract the virus. Community spread is when it's not clear how or where people are getting infected.
The recommendation should be when a clinician or a public health individual suspects coronavirus, then we should be able to get a test for coronavirus.
California Governor Gavin Newsom announced Thursday officials are currently monitoring more than 8,400 people for the virus, and the CDC is moving quickly to provide more testing kits. CDC Director Robert Redfield maintained that the current strategy to combat the spread of the virus is aggressive containment. He said at this point, people do not need to be stocking up on food supplies and medicines or wearing masks in public. The agency is investigating how long coronavirus can survive and remain infectious on surfaces such as cardboard and plastic.
And at CPAC, we sat down with Representative Mark Walker, who gave his insights into the coronavirus as it's seen in Washington. He says getting people to understand what the outbreak could become is what matters most right now.
What preparations, what kind of scenarios are being talked about, I guess both in terms of the potential health crisis and also economic repercussions worldwide?
I think the first thing all across the Hill today, in fact even in our leadership team this morning, our conference this evening, we were making sure that people understand the serious nature of what this coronavirus could be. It's kind of like preparing for a hurricane, being a native Floridian. You don't know where it's going to land, but it's go ahead to get out in front of it and start the preparing. That could come from a funding standpoint, but also from the healthcare side as well.
So practically speaking, what kind of scenarios are being talked about?
Well, we don't want to forecast too much. We've got 15 Americans right now that are impacted. We did get reports late out of China today that some of this is subsiding, so to speak, but we take that with a grain of salt. Sometimes China doesn't always shoot straight with us. As really the ranking member on intelligence and counterterrorism, we are constantly pushing back on some of the cyber attacks and other things. So we're wanting to make sure this is legit. If it is, we celebrate with it. But we want to make sure, and the president deserves a little bit of credit, even going back as far as January 6th to even getting Americans, making sure they were taken care of, but even offering some of the support to the mainland that was denied at first. Yes.
And on the economic side, are there also preparations going on there?
There are. In fact, I was just back in North Carolina talking with a group that was connected with a hardware company that by April, if something doesn't happen, they're going to start hemorrhaging because of our dependence so much on China. Even the mask and some of the things that we would consider security items are made there. So we've got to really move quickly when it comes to our independence and making sure that we do not have a shortfall in these areas.
So is that looking for different supply chains or domestic manufacturing?
Supply chains is exactly. You fully understand this process. Yeah. I think we're even working on that and moving now. Obviously, the government has a certain role in it. We can't dictate or usurp our will on the private sector, but our job is to maybe create some space where some modifications could be made.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My privilege.
Iran has the highest number of deaths from the coronavirus outside China, with official reports at 34 so far, but the outbreak there could be even worse than reports suggest. Our France correspondent, David Vives, has the story.
Narges Khanalizadeh is among the first victims of the coronavirus in Iran. The nurse's death stirred up emotion on social networks. Although she tested positive for the coronavirus on February 26th, according to Iran's regime, she died from the flu. Khanalizadeh's case challenged the official narrative on the coronavirus. She's not the only one, as we can see people posting information on the coronavirus situation in Iran that depicts a reality much different from the information released by the regime. Iranian MP Ahmad Farahani declared to the press on February 24th that in the region of Qom, the virus killed at least 50 people. At that time, the Iranian regime said there were 12 deaths in the whole country. According to former diplomat and Middle East expert Nidar Nouri, the regime is covering up the coronavirus. The virus outbreak started 3 weeks ago in Iran. This has been confirmed by some MPs, but our source is the medical staff and nurses who share their information on social networks. According to Nouri, the regime covered up the outbreak while important events took place. February 11th marked the 40th anniversary of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, and MP elections were held on February 16th. But the outbreak came to a point that was no longer possible to conceal. Iran's Vice Minister of Health was infected with the virus, and more officials could be infected by now. According to our sources, several mullah and high-ranking officials are now infected by the coronavirus. China is the first business partner of the Tehran regime, and for Nouri, this might explain why the outbreak is affecting Iran so seriously. The regime is so dependent on China, despite warnings coming from the WHO and medical agencies throughout the country. As flights between China and Iran continue, Mahan Air, the first plane company, made at least 55 flights since the beginning of the outbreak. Meanwhile, the Iranian regime accuses Washington of triggering fear over the coronavirus. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said that Iran may have concealed vital details about its outbreak. He also urged all nations to tell the truth about the coronavirus. David Vives, NTD News.
Back to the U.S., South Carolina is holding the last presidential primary before Super Tuesday, and it's pretty super in its own right. The Palmetto State's vote will be a likely major deciding factor in the future of some candidates' campaigns, with a few possibly ending.
South Carolina, the state Joe Biden calls his firewall. But in reality, it's his fourth quarter and he needs a Hail Mary.
Are you going to win?
Yes. All right. Because South Carolina is the trajectory to winning the Democratic nomination. South Carolina looks favorable for Biden. He got an endorsement from Representative James Clyburn this week, and in a new Monmouth University poll, Biden is ahead of national frontrunner Senator Bernie Sanders.
One of the serious things we got to do is make sure that we defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country, Donald Trump.
South Carolina is basically do or die for some Democratic presidential hopefuls, like Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Are you in this fight with me? Let's do this.
Senator Amy Klobuchar.
And I'm asking you to vote for me. Thank you so much, everyone.
Businessman Tom Steyer.
You know, I just don't believe that having the government take over big parts of the economy is a smart thing to do.
And former Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Not all of the answers have to come from Washington, but more of the funding should.
Another former mayor, Mike Bloomberg, isn't on the ballot in South Carolina, focusing instead on later contests.
President Trump hosted an African American History Month reception at the White House. He gave a speech praising the contributions of African Americans to the United States and hosted a roundtable discussion with Black leaders.
President Trump hosted an African American History Month reception on Thursday at the White House. Trump pointed out the great contributions and sacrifices of African Americans in helping build the United States.
From the very beginning of our republic, African American heroes poured out their blood, sweat, heart, and soul to protect American freedom and to realize our founding promise that we are all made equal by the hand of Almighty God.
President Trump spoke about the progress made in the black community during his presidency. He mentioned the historically low black unemployment rate, funding for historically black colleges, and criminal justice reform.
In every field, every generation, and every calling, African Americans have lifted up our nation to new heights. And like all citizens, you're entitled to a government that puts your needs, your interests, and your families first. And that's what we're doing.
During a roundtable with black leaders on the same day, former NFL player Jack Brewer called Trump the first black president. Other participants at the event cheered the comment.
A Chinese scientist was sentenced to 24 months in federal prison for stealing more than $1 billion in trade secrets from his former employer, a U.S. petroleum company.
Tan Hongjing, a Chinese national and U.S. permanent resident, was arrested in December 2018. He pleaded guilty last November to charges relating to stealing trade secrets after admitting to downloading research materials from Phillips 66 without authorization. The stolen information related to the manufacturing of an unspecified energy product estimated to be worth roughly $1.4 billion to $1.8 billion. Tan was an associate scientist from Phillips 66 in Oklahoma. He was assigned to work with a team to develop next-generation battery technologies for lithium-based battery systems. The DOJ said Tan downloaded hundreds of files to a thumb drive on December 2018 and then submitted his resignation on the same day. According to court documents, Tan told a co-worker at the company that he planned to return to China. During the investigation, the FBI found on Tan's laptop an employment agreement from a Chinese company that produces lithium-ion battery materials. The federal judge also ordered Tan to pay $150,000 in restitution and spent 3 years on probation following his release from prison. This prosecution is among a growing list of cases targeting Chinese state-sponsored theft of U.S. trade secrets.
Coming up, Hong Kong police arrest some major figures in the pro-democracy movement. Find out what they are accused of when we return.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
A frontline medic in the center of China's coronavirus outbreak tells us about his experiences and the pain of seeing death. NTD Xiaohua Gu has the details.
Intense workload, supply shortage, and death. A frontline medic in China tells us his agony of seeing coworkers die from the coronavirus, one after the other. His voice has been distorted to protect his identity.
Actually, at first we couldn't accept the facts. Many team members were very sad and crying. We couldn't bear it, so we would just cry behind others' backs. We can only slowly suffer through this.
Dr. Chen is among the over 700 medical staff sent to Ezhou for support. He said 70 staff members have died of the virus in the city's central hospital where he works. With over 1 million people, Ezhou is a city only half an hour's train ride from Wuhan, the center of China's coronavirus outbreak. Chen said he and his colleagues, too, are afraid of death and infection.
Some of our team members dare not tell their family members. Do you know the first thing that some people did after they were notified of the dispatch? They took a photo with their family members, fearing they will never return.
Medics sent to Ezhou are fairly young, as the workload is intense. A 6-hour shift in a hazmat suit means lack of oxygen, lots of sweat, and no bathroom.
We took over about a dozen patients who were critically ill, and 6 of them have passed.
Chen told us patient situations can quickly turn bad. He said he had a patient with kidney failure and a lung that was hardened like a stone within 3 weeks of having symptoms. He hopes the outbreak will soon end. Xiaohua Gu, NTD News, New York.
Hong Kong police arrested 3 prominent members of the city's democratic movement today. They include local publishing tycoon Jimmy Lai and 2 former pro-democracy legislators.
Self-made millionaire and local media mogul Jimmy Lai has been a major financial patron of Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement. He was arrested by police at his house on Friday and charged with so-called illegal gathering. In July of last year, Lai met with U.S. Vice President Mike Pence and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in Washington. According to the State Department, Pompeo and Lai discussed the extradition bill and Hong Kong's autonomy under the one country, two systems framework.
Well, the Hong Kong situation is getting tense here, but we have to go on. We have to go on.
Online, U.S. Senator Josh Hawley took to Twitter to condemn Lai's arrest. He called it a transparent attempt by Beijing to silence pro-democracy voices. Hawley added that while coronavirus ravages in China, repression is Beijing's priority. Aside from Lai, 2 other pro-democracy campaigners were also arrested. Hong Kong's Democratic Party wrote on its official Facebook page that Yeung Sum, the party's former chairman and a former member of the city's legislative council, was taken away by police Friday morning. The Democracy Party stated that Yeung was also accused of taking part in an illegal assembly on August 31st last year. It called Yeung's arrest an act of revenge by Hong Kong authorities. Local TV reports revealed that former vice chairman of the Labour Party, Lee Cheuk-ya, was also arrested on Friday on the same charges. The arrest of the 3 comes after months of intense pro-democracy protests last year. Lai left the police station following his arrest later on Friday. Police say all 3 have been charged and are set to appear in court on May 5th.
Up next, some officials are working to phase out gifted and talented programs in New York City schools, but there is no set plan for how it's going to be done. Find out more after the break.
Oh, the show is phenomenal. This is the best ever. The way I look at Shen Yun is this heavenly experience. I have never seen in my life so many amazing dancers, so many amazing and beautiful costumes.
Everything in the movements, in the smile, in the emotion, they could bring grace. I was taking my dish, I was really impressed.
The back extension, the leg extension, the rotation, absolute perfection. I just have chills, can you tell?
The music is really extraordinary.
It sounded like it was pre-recorded, like it was so perfect. And I looked down and I could see all the orchestra playing. It was hard to believe it was actual live music. It was so perfect.
I like how it's not just beautiful with the colors and the music, but also it's funny because there's some storytelling elements to it.
I love every moment, especially the message of the Chinese ancient culture.
There's no other company in the United States that does this.
My heart was touched tonight. And every time I see actors perform with grace and dignity like that, it's a spiritual experience in itself.
I see God. I see the spirit of love and peace and the way that you would want the universe to be.
The energy that I got from watching is that internal spirit that I think that we all have that comes from our Creator. And I could feel that in my heart and in my soul.
I would tell my friends to see Shen Yun because it is life-changing. And you'll walk away feeling positive and like you want to help the world be a better place.
Everyone should see something so pretty.
Our kids are 6 and 8 years old, and they enjoyed it and would like to come back to see it again.
I think it's for all people, and everyone needs to see it. Absolutely everyone.
The future of gifted and talented programs in some New York City schools is still undecided. It's been 6 months since the city's mayor and chancellor announced they wanted to scrap the program. Some schools have already started phasing out the programs, while others are still unclear about the next steps.
Chancellor Carenza and Mayor de Blasio said in August they aim to get rid of the gifted and talented programs in the name of diversity. While the statistics do show that the programs are made up of majority white and Asian students, some point out that there is a shortage of programs to begin with, and in some communities, no gifted program at all.
I looked at many different options whenever I was looking, because she qualified, but there was never any seats. What I saw was that the gifted and talented programs were representative of the neighborhoods that they found themselves in.
Rather than expanding the gifted programs to all communities, detracking is an alternate route being considered, and some schools are already doing it. The goal is to remove the gifted program and raise the bar for all students. But some are concerned about what this will look like in the classroom.
Are we really supposed to believe that under the enrichment model, every child will get a customized education plan and a teacher will teach a class of 32 kids and be able to meet each child exactly where they are?
Recognizing the teacher's critical role in implementing detracking, educational policy researcher Hallie Potter says they must be given the proper resources to do it right.
So to do detracking well, what you want to do is have training and supports for teachers so that everyone becomes familiar with the new challenging curriculum that all students are going to have access to.
And what do parents think? One says she fears that the parents' voice is being left out of the discussion altogether.
I see a lot of things being repeated that are being challenged in other areas, but it seems like parents don't have that voice, unfortunately.
She says there should be more options for parents to choose from, not less, since all kids are different.
For me, I want to become an architectural engineer right now, so I want a more structured education.
While there are many different voices talking about the future of New York City's gifted programs, a common ground among them is that a solid plan is needed. Melina Weiskup, NTD News, New York.
The UK government has unveiled a tough negotiating mandate for trade talks with the European Union, saying it will walk away with no deal at the end of the transition period in December if good progress is not made by June.
The UK government has unveiled a tough negotiating mandate for trade talks with the European Union. It said on Thursday that it's ready to walk away with no deal at the end of the current transition period in December if good progress was not made by June. At the heart of the conflict is Britain's demand for a trade deal along the lines of the one between the EU and Canada. the EU has ruled that out, saying Britain, being a neighbour of the bloc, is a greater threat to the bloc's market as it does more business than Canada. It fears Britain could undercut its market by lowering standards.
This is a great country with the highest possible standards for the environment, for animal welfare, for social protection, for workers' rights. Of course, we're not going to engage in some race to the bottom. We're going to maintain the very highest standards. All we want is mutual recognition of each other's high standards and access to each other's markets.
Secretary of State. Senior Cabinet Minister Michael Gove said the UK deserves to be treated in the same way as other countries negotiating a trade deal with the EU.
The UK government seeks an FTA with robust protections for the environment and labour standards. But we do not see why the test of suitability in these areas should be adherence to EU law and submission to EU models of governance.
Britain may have technically already left the EU, but it now has just 10 months to negotiate a trade deal and agreements on everything from fishing to transport to replace more than 40 years of closely aligned political and economic relations.
Coming up, a Chinese Olympic swimming champion is banned for 8 years over drugs. Find out about his response after the break. The Court of Arbitration for Sport saying today the Chinese multiple world and Olympic swimming champion Sun Yang has been banned for the sport for 8 years for missing an out-of-competition test.
China's three-time Olympic gold medalist Sun Yang expressed his shock at being handed an 8-year ban on Friday for a dope test violation that ruled him out of the Tokyo Games and said he would immediately appeal the decision. The Court of Arbitration for Sport earlier accepted an appeal from the World Anti-Doping Agency against a decision by swimming's governing body to clear Sun of wrongdoing for his conduct during a 2018 test. CAS said the 8-year ban was imposed because the 28-year-old already had an earlier anti-doping rule violation against him. The Chinese swimmer is the reigning world and Olympic champion in 200 metres freestyle and won 2 gold medals in 2012 and another in 2016, but is also a controversial figure in the sport. At the Rio Games, Australian rival Mac Horton accused him of being a drug cheat and refused to share a podium with Sun at last year's World Championship, whilst the appeal hung over him. As did British swimmer Duncan Scott, who won 200 metres freestyle bronze. CAS ruled that Sun's World Championship results should remain because he passed doping control before and after the 2018 test, when his entourage smashed vials containing blood samples taken out of competition.
An 84-year-old woman sunk a putt during an Ole Miss basketball game to win a new car. Mary Ann Wakefield putted a golf ball 94 feet across a basketball court and into a hole under a sign for a 2020 Nissan Altima. Even though Ole Miss eventually lost the game, Miss Wakefield walked away with a car worth at least $24,000. Just last month, a fan sank a 94-foot putt during a Baylor University basketball game for a $5,000 prize. And that's all for now. Thanks for tuning in. Join us again tonight. I'm Tiffany Meyer.